You know that feeling when you're sitting in a crowded theater? Or maybe you're just curled up on your couch reading a thriller late at night, and suddenly the narrative just completely pulls the rug out from under you.
Oh, absolutely.
Like your jaw drops, your eyes go wide, you actually gasp out loud, and your brain immediately starts racing backwards, rapidly flipping through every single scene you just witnessed, thinking, how on earth did I not see that coming?
It's one of the best feelings in the world.
Yeah, it really is.
I mean, it really is a profound, almost involuntary physiological response. Your heart rate actually spikes in those moments.
Wait, really? It actually spikes.
Yeah, it does. We experience it as a sudden shock, but simultaneously, it acts as this deeply satisfying puzzle, finally snapping into perfect alignment in our minds.
Right. But then if you think about the total opposite scenario, when a movie or a book tries to pull a massive twist on you, and instead of gasping, you just sit there rolling your eyes.
The worst.
You just feel completely cheated. It's that classic "it was all a dream" maneuver.
Right. Or the sudden, completely unearned introduction of an evil twin we've never even met before.
Exactly. The failed twist. It leaves us so frustrated.
Well, it's because it violates a very real, albeit unspoken, agreement between the storyteller and the audience. And when that contract is broken, the magic just evaporates.
So what is the actual difference between a masterpiece of a twist and a total eye-rolling flop? Because it feels like inexplicable magic when it works, but today we're going to learn that it's actually, well, it's pure meticulous architecture.
It really is.
Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to decode the anatomy of a plot twist. We really want to understand why some narrative reveals leave you absolutely breathless while others fall entirely flat.
And it is a fascinating question. To answer it, we're going to look at a rather unexpected intersection of fields today.
Yeah, we have a pretty wild stack of sources today.
We do. They might seem disconnected at first glance, but they weave together perfectly. We are diving into a really compelling academic paper by Catherine Elkins, exploring why artificial intelligence struggles so mightily to write fiction.
She calls it the AI fiction paradox, right?
Exactly, the AI fiction paradox. And we'll also be pulling from several classic narratology texts on narrative causality and structural ambiguity.
And we can't talk about twists without talking about Chekhov's gun, so we have research on that too.
Right. Plus, a recent computer science paper that proposes a brand new framework to essentially teach AI how to execute literary payoffs.
And here is the hook, the ultimate irony that we are going to be teasing apart today. Tech companies are currently spending billions, literally billions of dollars training AI on massive troves of modern fiction.
Massive amounts of data.
We are talking about the most hyper-advanced computational systems in human history, machines that have ingested every thriller, every mystery, every screenplay ever written.
Everything.
Yet, for all their unfathomable processing power, these systems are utterly incapable of writing a compelling plot twist.
It's wild.
So today, we are going to explore exactly why human brains uniquely crave the twist and the specific, almost mathematical narrative mechanics that writers use to deliver it.
Because it serves as a perfect lens through which to understand our own cognition. I mean, by looking at what the most advanced machines cannot do, we perfectly illuminate the bizarre, beautiful, and highly specific way the human mind processes stories.
I love that framework. So, to you, the listener, whether you're an aspiring writer trying to plot your first novel, a hardcore film buff analyzing cinema, or just someone who loves the thrill of a good mystery on a Sunday afternoon, this deep dive is going to give you X-ray vision into the stories you consume.
You'll never watch a movie the same way again.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we can understand the specific techniques of a twist, the actual mechanics of how it's done, we have to understand what a twist actually is on a psychological level.
Right, and this brings us to a fundamental distinction highlighted in the Elkins paper. The critical difference between physical causation and narrative causation.
Physical versus narrative.
Exactly. If we want to understand twists, we basically have to stop thinking like physicists and start thinking like storytellers.
Makes sense.
Because physical causation is straightforward. It's predictable, it's logical. If you hold a glass of water in the air and let it go, gravity dictates that it will fall to the floor. Cause and effect.
Yeah, if I drop a glass, it shatters. If it rains, the ground gets wet. It's binary, it's clean, and most importantly, it's highly predictable based on the laws of nature.
And artificial intelligence is fantastic at modeling physical causation.
Oh, sure.
If you ask a large language model to describe what happens when a glass falls off a tall table, it has absolutely no problem generating a statistically likely physically accurate response about shards of glass and spilled water.
Right, it completely understands the physical sequence.
But narrative causation plays by an entirely different set of rules.
Yeah.
A narrative event doesn't just need to be physically logical. It must feel psychologically motivated.
It has to have that human element.
Exactly. It has to be infused with human emotion. And crucially for a twist, it has to be dramatically surprising.
So narrative causation isn't just about what physically happens in a room, but why the character made it happen and how we, as the audience, feel about it happening.
Which leads us directly to what Elkins identifies as the temporal paradox of storytelling.
The temporal paradox.
Yes. This concept is basically the holy grail of the plot twist. A great narrative event, specifically a twist, must appear completely unclear and unpredictable when you're looking toward the future of the story.
Unpredictable in the moment.
Right, but it must feel almost inevitable when viewed retrospectively from the end.
Okay, unpredictable in the moment, but inevitable in hindsight. That is a really brilliant way to capture that feeling.
Elkins quotes the French novelist Marcel Proust here, which I think captures the philosophy beautifully.
Wow, what did he say?
Well, Proust observed that instead of giving us what we try in vain to discover through our own imagination, life actually gives us something that we could hardly imagine.
Wow.
Yet once it happens, we are, as he says, too ready to believe that the present is the only possible state of things.
So fiction has to artificially recreate that exact temporal asymmetry.
Precisely.
Let's unpack this temporal asymmetry because this really feels like the core of the entire experience. I like to compare a good plot twist to a magic trick.
Okay, Mike.
Because if a magician walks out on stage and tells the audience exactly what they're going to do, like, I am going to put this white rabbit into this black top hat, tap it 3 times, and pull it out of my left sleeve, it's incredibly boring.
Right, you predicted the future.
Exactly. There's no mystery there, just a sequence of physical events you're waiting to watch play out.
The outcome is entirely assured, so the dramatic tension just totally evaporates from the room.
But on the other hand, if that same magician walks out, waves a magic wand, and suddenly a completely random car explodes in the parking lot outside the theater.
I mean, that's surprising.
It's surprising, sure, people will jump out of their seats. But it's confusing. It feels totally random. It lacks any narrative logic.
Yeah, there's no connection.
Right. So a great plot twist is that perfect middle ground. It's a logical shock. You didn't see the rabbit appearing in the audience's lap, but once it does, you realize the magician had been planting subtle clues and misdirecting your attention the entire time.
That is a perfect analogy. And what's really fascinating is that we see this temporal paradox operating not just in murder mysteries or psychological thrillers, but in genres you might not expect to rely on suspense,
Like what?
like romance. Elkins points to Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice as an absolute masterclass in this specific type of narrative causation.
Wait, Pride and Prejudice, that doesn't exactly scream shocking plot twist to most people.
No, it doesn't.
You don't usually group Jane Austen with M. Night Shyamalan.
You really don't. But the underlying mechanics of narrative causation are absolutely identical to a thriller.
How so?
Well, think about the central character transformation. Elizabeth Bennet's realization of her own deep-seated prejudice feels genuinely shocking to her. And to the first-time reader, when Mr. Darcy's letter arrives, explaining George Wickham's true, insidious nature.
Oh, that's true. Because up until that exact moment in the book, Darcy is cemented in her mind and the reader's mind as the arrogant villain.
Exactly. And Wickham is the charming, misunderstood victim.
Right.
So looking forward from chapter 1, that emotional shift seems entirely impossible. You cannot imagine Elizabeth ever loving Darcy.
Right. They hate each other.
But looking backward after the letter is read, it feels entirely earned and inevitable.
Because Austen planted the clues.
Yes. Meticulous, subtle clues throughout the early chapters about Wickham's evasiveness, his smooth talking, and Darcy's fundamental, quiet consistency.
I never thought about it like that.
Darcy's capacity for change surprises us, yet his underlying decency was always present in the text through his care for his tenants and his protective nature over Elizabeth's sister, Lydia.
So the twist isn't a bomb going off. It's a profound character realization that retrospectively rewrites everything the reader thought they knew about the preceding chapters.
Exactly. Elkins even brings in an ethnographic study of romance readers by the scholar Janice Radway to back this up.
Okay, what did Radway find?
She found the ideal romance relies heavily on this exact structural logic. The end point that the core couple will end up together is assured from page 1.
Right, we all know they're getting married. It's a romance novel.
Exactly. But the narrative success of the book depends entirely on creating genuine, agonizing uncertainty about how two fundamentally incompatible people will manage to transform.
Ah,
The twist is the psychological authenticity of the unpredictable path they take to reach that inevitable conclusion.
meaning that to write a good twist, regardless of the genre, you have to actively manipulate the flow of time and information in the reader's brain.
You do.
Which brings us to the next big question. If narrative causation requires this unpredictable yet inevitable feeling, how does a writer actually build that? How do you construct this temporal magic trick on a blank page?
Well, to understand the architect's blueprint of a twist, we have to transition into some formal narratology terms from our sources.
Okay, hit me.
Specifically, we need to look at the gap between two foundational concepts, fabula and representation.
Fabula and representation. Okay, it sounds like we're getting into the academic weeds a bit here, but I know this is crucial to the architecture, so break those down for us.
It's actually quite intuitive once you see it applied. The fabula is the actual objective chronological sequence of events as they happen in the story's world.
Okay, so chronological time.
Right. So if a detective is trying to solve a murder, the fabula starts with the killer going to the store to buy the poison. Then the killer sneaks into the house and poisons the victim. Then the victim's body is discovered. Finally, the detective arrives and eventually catches the killer.
Event A leads to event B, which leads to event C.
It's exact.
The objective, linear reality of the fictional universe.
Representation, on the other hand, is the order in which the author chooses to reveal those specific events to you, the audience.
Ah, okay.
A plot twist is almost always born in the gap between the fabula and the representation. It is the art of non-chronological narration.
So the author is deliberately playing with the timeline of how we receive facts to manipulate our emotional state.
Precisely. Our narratology sources outline a very standard sequence of functions in a traditional story. You start with an initial equilibrium. Everything is normal.
Right.
This is then disrupted by an event, let's call it function A. This disruption leads to a decision or action by the protagonist, which we can call function C, and eventually the story settles into a new equilibrium.
It's a standard arc.
But 19th century writers started to realize they could drastically manipulate this sequence in the representation for maximum emotional impact.
Give us a tangible example. How are they manipulating that sequence?
Well, think about Edgar Allan Poe's story, The Assignation, or Robert Browning's famous poem, My Last Duchess.
Okay, classics.
In both of these works, the chronological function A, the inciting disruption, which in both cases involves a murder or a suicide, is completely hidden in the representation.
Oh, wow.
The author suppresses the inciting incident from the reader and only reveals it at the very end of the story. So chronologically, the murder happened first, but representationally, the knowledge of the murder hits the reader last, creating a massive shock.
Wait, hold on a second. If an author just hides the inciting murder until the last page, how is that not just terrible writing?
Well,
I mean, if I read a mystery and the author just withheld the fact that someone died until the glossary, I would feel totally cheated. I'd throw the book across the room. We established earlier that a bad twist makes you feel cheated.
Right, and that is the brilliant tension of this technique. You don't feel cheated because a master storyteller leaves what Elkins calls a meticulous informational trail.
An informational trail?
Yes. When the manipulation of the sequence is done correctly, it forces the reader's brain to constantly actively rewrite the chronological fabula in their head as they read.
Oh, I see. So you aren't just passively receiving the story.
Exactly. You are actively participating in constructing the reality. You only feel cheated if the hidden information contradicts the clues provided.
Ah.
If the clues were there all along, hiding in plain sight, you feel outsmarted. And feeling fairly outsmarted is a joyful feeling for a reader.
So the author has to leave a trail of breadcrumbs. They have to leave clues without giving the game away too early.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the toolkit writers use to ensure the audience doesn't feel cheated when that hidden fabula is finally revealed. And we cannot talk about narrative breadcrumbs without talking about arguably the most famous literary device of all time.
I believe you are referring to the principle coined by the Russian playwright Anton Chekhov.
Chekhov's gun. The famous quote goes something like, if in Act 1 you have a pistol hanging on the wall, then in the following one it should be fired. It functions as an unspoken contract with the reader. If the author deliberately draws your attention to something, it must have significance to the plot. The author's making a promise, like, I am not wasting your time with meaningless details.
It is the absolute bedrock of narrative trust. And Catherine Elkins connects Chekhov's gun directly to this fascinating concept she calls informational revaluation.
Informational revaluation.
Yes, this is how the temporal paradox actually functions on a sentence-by-sentence level in our brains.
Let's really dig into informational revaluation. What does that actually look and feel like for the reader sitting on their couch?
Well, when you're reading a story and you encounter a seemingly minor detail, maybe it's a barometer on a wall,
Yeah.
or a casual guest making small talk at a dinner party, that detail seems informationally neutral in the moment.
Right. It's just background texture. It's world building to make the scene feel real.
Exactly. You just log it as setting the scene and move on.
Yeah.
But when the twist finally hits, your brain has to retrospectively reweight the significance of that specific detail. Suddenly, you realize the casual dinner guest making small talk is actually the mastermind killer.
Oh, man.
The text on the page didn't change. The ink is exactly the same. But their informational status in your brain completely flipped from low-priority background noise to high-priority plot essential. You have revalued the information.
So the second you learn the twist, your brain zooms all the way back to that dinner party scene and highlights that guest in neon flashing lights.
Yes.
You suddenly remember every word they said in a completely new context.
Even Prost's narrator in Search of Lost Time constantly laments this phenomenon. He frequently has trouble paying attention to the right details in his life.
Really?
Yeah, things he thought were incredibly vital end up meaning nothing, while tiny throwaway details he overlooked end up holding the key to understanding the people around him. Fiction forces us to actively practice this cognitive revaluation.
You know, one of our sources, the computer science paper proposing a framework called CFPG, actually breaks this dynamic down into a highly codified mechanical structure.
The STP framework.
Right, the FTP framework. And they're using this to try and teach artificial intelligence how to do this.
Yes, the Codified Foreshadowing Payoff Generation Framework. It is a brilliant attempt to mathematically systematize Chekhov's gun. They break the process into 3 distinct measurable components: foreshadow, trigger, and payoff. FTP.
Walk us through those 3 steps, because this is where the architecture really gets clear.
First is the foreshadow, the F. This is the initial setup, or what the computer science researchers call an unresolved anomaly.
Unresolved anomaly, got it.
It introduces a causal debt into the narrative. It is the literal gun placed on the wall.
Okay.
Second is the trigger, the T. This is the crucial middle step that most amateur writers forget. The trigger is the specific narrative condition that makes the foreshadow actionable.
So it's not just sitting there.
Exactly. It's the moment the characters get trapped in a room, the villain approaches, and they desperately need a weapon.
So the gun doesn't just go off randomly in the background. Something in the plot has to trigger its necessity.
And finally, you have the payoff, the P. This is the concluding event that resolves the causal commitment. The character grabs the gun from the wall and fires it, fulfilling the promise made to the reader in Act 1.
Let's make this really visceral for the listener with some concrete examples, because seeing this in action is so satisfying. The CFTG paper uses Arthur Conan Doyle's The Hound of the Baskervilles to illustrate this.
Oh, a masterful example.
Yeah.
So applying the FTP framework to Sherlock Holmes. The foreshadow occurs early on when Sir Henry arrives at his hotel in London, and one of his boots mysteriously disappears from his room.
Just a single boot.
Right. It's a strange, unresolved anomaly. Why would a thief steal a single old boot?
It feels weird, it feels out of place, but you just log it away in your mind and keep reading.
Exactly. Then comes the trigger. The trigger occurs much later in the story, out on the foggy moors, when Sherlock Holmes discovers that the villain, Stapleton, is using a giant, savage hound to hunt people down by scent.
Oh.
Suddenly, the condition is set. The necessity of scent is established.
And boom, the payoff hits. The reader realizes, and the text subsequently confirms, that the boot was stolen specifically to give the demonic hound Sir Henry's scent.
Yes.
The unresolved anomaly from the hotel room is perfectly logically resolved. It is an incredibly satisfying cognitive click.
We see this powerful framework utilized across all forms of media. Think about the acclaimed television show Breaking Bad.
Oh, man.
Our sources cite the famous, incredibly tense box cutter episode.
The box cutter. That episode is legendary for its tension.
It really is. Early in that episode, a seemingly innocent tool, a standard box cutter, is introduced in the Super Lab. It's the foreshadow. It seems completely mundane, just a piece of equipment lying around.
Yeah, you wouldn't even think twice about it.
But by the end of the episode, the context drastically shifts. The trigger and the terrifying antagonist, Gus Fring, uses that exact box cutter to brutally murder one of his own men in front of the main characters.
The payoff.
Yes, it takes an everyday, mundane object and flips its informational value into something deeply horrifying.
Breaking Bad is essentially a masterclass in the FTP framework. The ricin cigarette is another famous one mentioned in the sources.
Oh, definitely.
That is a Chekhov's gun that plays out over a massive multi-season arc. It hangs on the wall for literally years before it finally fires, and when it does, the payoff is monumental.
In cinema, consider the climax of Jurassic Park.
Oh, good one.
The foreshadow is the giant, fossilized T-Rex skeleton looming over the main lobby in the visitor center. For the entire movie, it just looks like thematic decoration. It's world building.
But the payoff is glorious. In the climax, when the humans are surrounded by velociraptors, the living T-Rex storms into the lobby, attacks the raptors, and crashes into its own ancient replica.
Destroying the skeleton to save the day.
Exactly. The solution to their problem was hanging right in front of us the entire movie.
We even see it in modern sci-fi literature, like Ready Player One. Early in the book, the protagonist, Parzival, plays a perfect game of Pac-Man and is rewarded with a simple, innocuous quarter.
The foreshadow.
Right. It seems like a minor detail, just a bit of retro world-building flavor to establish his gaming skills. But the payoff comes much later, when he is seemingly killed in the digital world, and that specific quarter acts as an extra life, saving him from a game over.
Hearing all these examples, it really makes you wonder why this specific mechanism feels so undeniably good to us. Like, why do we love the missing boot and the box cutter and the quarters so much?
It fundamentally comes down to how human psychology is wired for pattern recognition.
Pattern recognition.
We are, at our core, survival machines that evolved over millions of years to spot patterns in the noise of our environment. Spotting a pattern meant the difference between finding food and being eaten. So when we see a detail in a story, our brain automatically starts trying to fit it into a larger pattern. When the payoff happens and the pattern beautifully completes itself, our brain rewards us with a massive hit of dopamine. It provides a deeply satisfying aha moment. It is a cognitive click that our neurochemistry literally processes as a victory.
That cognitive click, it is the reason we tolerate the agonizing tension of a thriller. We are craving that neurochemical release.
Exactly.
But this brings up a huge problem for writers. If every single detail introduced in a story was a Chekhov's gun, the story would be incredibly boring and predictable.
You just see it all coming.
Right. You'd just be sitting there making a mental checklist of objects and waiting for them to be used. So to make a twist actually shocking, writers must employ decoys. They have to actively play defense against our hyperactive pattern recognition.
They absolutely do. If you only put the real vital clues on the board, a savvy audience will solve the puzzle by page 10. You have to introduce noise into the signal.
Noise into the signal.
And this brings us to two essential tools of narrative misdirection: the MacGuffin and the red herring.
Let's start with the MacGuffin. I love this term. It was originally coined by an English screenwriter named Angus MacPhail, but it was really popularized by the master of cinematic suspense himself, Alfred Hitchcock.
Yes, the MacGuffin is a fascinating device because it is entirely structural in nature. It is an object, a device, or a goal that drives the plot forward, but intrinsically, it has absolutely no specific narrative payoff of its own.
It's just a motivator.
It is simply an excuse for the characters to move, interact, and collide with one another.
The sources give two absolutely perfect cinematic examples of this. First, the letters of transit in the classic film Casablanca.
Oh, perfect example.
Right. Everyone in the movie is desperately searching for these letters. They drive all the action, all the conflict, all the betrayals. But the letters themselves, they don't matter at all.
Not at all.
They don't have a hidden magical power. They are just a mechanical reason for Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman to be trapped in a stressful situation together.
Another fantastic example is the glowing briefcase in Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction.
Oh, definitely.
Every character in that movie is willing to kill or die for whatever is inside that briefcase.
Right.
But we, the audience, never even see what is inside it.
You have no idea.
And it doesn't matter. The briefcase is the ultimate MacGuffin. Its only purpose is to get dangerous characters into a room together so they can talk.
So MacGuffin is a structural motivator. But a red herring is something much more devious, much more psychologically manipulative.
Oh, yes. The red herring is, in many ways, the literal opposite of a Chekhov's gun, while simultaneously masquerading as one to trick your pattern recognition.
Tricky.
A red herring appears crucially important from the very beginning. The author deliberately draws your attention to it, highlights it, and makes you genuinely believe it is the key to solving the whole mystery.
But it turns out to be a complete distraction.
Exactly. A beautifully constructed false trail.
The sources use Harry Potter and The Prisoner of Azkaban as the prime example here, and it fits perfectly.
It really does.
For the entire length of that book, Sirius Black is set up as the ultimate terrifying villain. All the clues point to him. He looks like a bad guy. He acts like a bad guy. The ominous Grim follows the main characters around.
That's so well done.
He is a massive, meticulously crafted red herring designed to hide the true twist, which is that the seemingly harmless rat, Scabbers, who is actually Peter Pettigrew, is the real villain hiding in plain sight.
The author deliberately plants false clues to lead the reader to a false yet entirely logical conclusion. This misdirection is what makes the eventual reveal of the real truth so much more shocking.
Because you were looking the wrong way the whole time.
Exactly.
But wait, earlier we established that Chekhov's gun is an unspoken contract with the reader.
Right.
The author promises not to waste our time with false expectations because that makes the reader feel cheated. So isn't a red herring inherently breaking the rules of that contract? Isn't it just a failed Chekhov's gun? Like, why don't we feel cheated by the Sirius Black revelation?
It's a vital distinction, and
Yeah.
it really comes down to the nuance of narrative purpose. A red herring is not an authorial mistake or a forgotten plot thread. It is actually a highly specialized, intentional type of Chekhov's gun.
Okay, how so?
It does serve a specific narrative purpose. Its purpose is to actively mislead the protagonist and the reader. The payoff of a red herring isn't that the object is used to solve the crime.
Right.
The payoff is the genuine surprise you feel when you realize you've been thoroughly fooled.
Oh. So the red herring is a gun that fires blanks, but the loud bang of the blank firing is entirely necessary to cover the subtle noise of the real gun going off somewhere else in the story.
That is a phenomenal way to conceptualize it. The red herring allows the main character and the reader to be surprised simultaneously, which creates a powerful bond of empathy.
That makes total sense.
This intentional misdirection is vastly different from a true misfired gun, which is when an author introduces a compelling mystery and just forgets about it or fails to resolve it due to poor planning.
The sources actually cite the television show Lost as a prime example of these misfired guns, which is something a lot of viewers still feel passionate about.
Oh, absolutely. Lost was incredibly famous for introducing immensely compelling mysteries early on. Polar bears roaming a tropical island, mysterious sequences of numbers, the terrifying smoke monster.
People were obsessed with finding the answers.
But because many of these elements had no planned payoff, or the eventual payoff was completely muddled, they became true misfired guns. They frustrated the audience deeply because the unspoken contract was broken.
Right.
There was no FTP framework underlying them. There were just foreshadows that hung there on the wall forever, gathering dust.
It really is the difference between being playfully, skillfully tricked by a master magician and just being lied to by someone who doesn't know how the trick ends.
Misdirection requires immense authorial intention.
So we have talked about hiding information with representation, and we've talked about misdirecting the reader's attention with red herrings. But what about when the author just refuses to give you the clarifying information at all? Because sometimes the most powerful twists occur when the writer refuses to fire the gun, forcing the reader's own brain to construct the twist internally.
This brings us to a highly advanced, incredibly delicate narrative technique. Structural ambiguity and the intentional creation of narrative gaps.
Narrative gaps.
Right. A truly ambiguous narrative isn't just confusing or poorly written. It is meticulously designed to offer the reader mutually exclusive fabulous.
Mutually exclusive fabulous, meaning two completely different chronological realities that both perfectly fit the exact same set of clues provided in the text.
Exactly. And the most famous example of this in all of Western literature, which is cited heavily in our sources, is Henry James's classic novella, The Turn of the Screw.
A classic ghost story. Or, depending on how you read it, maybe not a ghost story at all.
That is precisely the genius of the ambiguity. In The Turn of the Screw, a young, inexperienced governess is hired to watch over two children at a massive, isolated country estate.
Spooky setting.
Right. Shortly after arriving, she begins to see terrifying ghosts, and she firmly believes these ghosts are trying to possess and corrupt the children. But James constructs the narrative sentence by sentence so perfectly that you can read the entire book in two entirely different contradictory ways.
Fabula A and Fabula B.
Yes. In Fabula A, the governess is a heroic, reliable narrator. The ghosts are absolutely real, and she is genuinely protecting these innocent children from actual supernatural evil. It was a straight ghost story.
Okay, but in Fabula B.
In Fabula B, there are no ghosts at all. The governess is a deeply neurotic, unreliable fabricator, and the ghosts are entirely hallucinations manifesting in her own mind.
Wow.
In this reading, the real terrifying danger to the children isn't supernatural. The danger is being trapped in an isolated house with a woman descending into madness.
And James balances the clues so delicately, so masterfully, that neither reading can be definitively proven or disproven by the text on the page.
It's perfectly balanced.
So the twist and the turn of the screw isn't a single shocking revelation at the end. The twist is the agonizing realization by the reader that they have to actively choose which reality they believe.
Yes. And furthermore, their choice reveals more about their own psychology and biases than it does about the author's original intent.
But why is that so deeply uncomfortable for us? Like, why is it so hard for a reader to accept a twist that changes everything they thought they knew, or to simply hold two contradictory possibilities in their head at the same time? Why do we desperately want to pick one fabula, plant our flag in it, and defend it?
Well, it comes down to a powerful psychological phenomenon known as the primacy effect.
Primacy effect.
As human beings, we have a profound, hardwired cognitive tendency to accept the very first piece of information we are given about a situation as absolute truth. When we are introduced to a new scenario, we immediately, automatically build a configuration, a context, in our minds to make sense of it.
I like to liken this to real-world office gossip because it's the exact same cognitive mechanism at play.
Oh, definitely.
Imagine you arrive at work and you hear a rumor from a friend. Oh my gosh, Steve from accounting was screaming at the barista in the lobby this morning. Immediately, instantly, you form a complete narrative in your head.
Right.
Steve is a jerk. Steve has anger issues. You build a whole psychological context around this single isolated data point.
You have constructed a complete fabula based on a very incomplete representation of the events.
Exactly. But then the twist happens later that afternoon. You talk to Steve by the water cooler, and you learn the real context. You find out his mother just passed away the night before, he hasn't slept in 3 days, he is completely falling apart. And the barista actually accidentally spilled scalding hot coffee all over his hand, which is why he yelled out.
Wow.
The true fabula is revealed. But because of the primacy effect, your brain stubbornly holds on to that initial emotional reaction you had in the morning. You still kind of think Steve is a jerk, even though the new information completely 100% exonerates him. We interpret isolated moments based entirely on whatever context we have already built, and our brains absolutely hate tearing that context down.
It's so true. Our sources reference a fantastic essay by Mark Twain to illustrate this exact compulsion.
Oh, what did Twain say?
Twain talks about looking at a painting of two men on horseback and instantly narrativizing the image. Without any context whatsoever, the viewer invents a complex story. They're old friends, or they're bitter enemies, or they're traveling to a tavern.
We just make it up.
We do.
Yeah.
We cannot abide a gap in information. If an author leaves a gap, our brains will frantically fill it with our own biases and assumptions.
So a great twist weaponizes this primacy effect against us.
It absolutely does.
It encourages us to build the wrong context, actively helps us believe it, and then ruthlessly shatters it with the missing piece of information.
Which is absolutely thrilling when it happens in the safe, controlled space of fiction. We love having our assumptions shattered when there are no real-world consequences.
But this incredibly complex, delicate dance we've been talking about for the last hour, this intricate web of temporal asymmetry, informational revaluation, FTP triggers, and manipulating human psychology. This brings us to our final and honestly most startling realization of this entire deep dive.
Yes, it does.
And it has to do with artificial intelligence.
This is where the Catherine Elkins paper and the CFPG computer science paper converge, outlining what Elkins terms the AI fiction paradox.
Let's lay this paradox out clearly. Tech companies have trained their large language models on basically the entirety of human-written output. Every novel, every screenplay, every mystery, every romance.
Mountains of data.
The AI has ingested every Agatha Christie book, every Arthur Conan Doyle story, and every M. Night Shyamalan script. Yet, despite having all this structural data, despite knowing the dictionary definition of a twist, AI cannot write a coherent, twisting novel.
It really can't.
It can write a decent corporate email, it can write flawless code, but it cannot write a genuinely good plot twist. Why?
Well, it fundamentally comes down to how the underlying architecture of these AI models operates. Current transformer models use a mechanism called forward generation.
Forward generation.
Right. When an AI writes a sentence, it is essentially calculating the statistical likelihood of the next word, or token, based purely on the previous words in the sequence. It is optimizing for local coherence.
Coherence.
It is always looking at what just happened in the immediate past to decide what logically happens next.
Ah, so it's perfectly predicting the next logical step. It is the master of physical causation.
Precisely. It is unparalleled at physical causation. But, as we have learned today, a plot twist requires narrative causation, which means the author has to work backwards.
Backwards. Right.
You cannot plant a Chekhov's gun on the wall in Act 1 unless you already know exactly who's going to be shot with it in Act 3. You have to firmly know the payoff in order to subtly plant the foreshadow.
Okay.
AI, in its current standard form, lacks a causal state tracking mechanism. It doesn't hold a long-term hidden goal in its architecture and work backward to disguise it from the reader.
I marvel at this. It really highlights how profoundly different human thought is from machine computation. When I think of how current AI generates text, I think of an improv comedian.
An improv comedian, I like that. How so?
Well, if you have ever taken an improv class, you know the golden rule. Yes, and.
Right, yes, and.
Whatever your scene partner says, you accept it as reality and build on it immediately in the present moment. If I walk on stage and say, "Look, that alien," you have to say, "Yes, and he is stealing our spaceship."
You go with it.
You're always moving forward, generating the next local step based on the immediate prompt. That is exactly what an AI does. It is a brilliant improviser.
That's a great point.
But a great human novelist is not an improviser. They are a master architect. They are building a massive bridge from both sides of a canyon simultaneously, planting the deep foundations in Act 1 and Act 3, doing all the complex math so they meet perfectly in the middle in Act 2.
That is a highly accurate analogy for the technical limitation, because AI is just endlessly yesing and. It suffers from a phenomenon the researchers call causal hallucinations.
Causal hallucinations. That sounds like a drug from a cyberpunk novel, but what does it actually mean in the context of text generation?
It means the AI fires the gun way too early.
Oh.
The CFPG paper actually ran specific tests on this. If you give an AI a prompt with a foreshadowing setup like the missing boot in The Hound of the Baskervilles and ask it to continue the story, it will see the keyword boot and immediately try to resolve the mystery in the very next sentence.
You're kidding.
No, it might write something like, Sir Henry looked under the bed and found his boot.
It ruins the suspense immediately.
Completely ruins it.
It can't hold the tension. It just resolves the problem.
It prematurely fires the Chekhov's gun because it cannot maintain a long-term unresolved causal commitment. It lacks the multi-scale emotional architecture required to balance sentence-level generation with global arc plotting. The AI doesn't understand that the reader actually wants to wait for the trigger.
Right.
It just wants to close the logical loop as fast and efficiently as possible.
So it is entirely too literal. It sees an anomaly, it fixes the anomaly, completely missing the emotional architecture of suspense and anticipation that humans crave.
Exactly. And to fix this glaring issue, the computer scientists in the CFPG paper actually had to build an external codified state tracker for the AI.
Like training wheels.
Basically.
Yeah.
They had to force the AI to maintain a foreshadow pool, a literal separate list of unfulfilled narrative commitments, and physically prevent the AI from resolving them until a specific trigger condition was met in the text.
Wow.
Only by forcing the AI to stop improvising and start rigidly tracking its causal debts could they get it to generate a delayed payoff that felt somewhat like a human twist.
They had to mathematically force the AI to withhold information. That just goes to show how deeply unnatural narrative twisting is to a purely statistical machine, and how uniquely, wonderfully human it is to enjoy being kept in the dark.
It is a uniquely human cognitive quirk. We actively enjoy the anxiety of the unresolved anomaly because we unconsciously anticipate the neurochemical joy of the informational revaluation. Machines just want to resolve the anomaly and power down.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today. Let's summarize the mission we set out on. We wanted to decode the anatomy of a plot twist, and we have learned that a great twist is not just a cheap surprise or a random shock value moment.
Far from it.
It is a masterclass in narrative causation. It is the deliberate, meticulous manipulation of the gap between the the objective chronological sequence of events, and the representation, how the author chooses to tell you those events.
Right, and we saw how brilliant writers use Chekhov's guns to leave an informational trail, making the unpredictable seem retrospectively inevitable.
Yeah.
We saw how they use red herrings and MacGuffins to actively misdirect our innate pattern recognition. And we explored how they weaponize the primacy effect, letting us build our own false contexts just so they can brilliantly shatter them.
And finally, we looked at why this entire deeply psychological process is so profoundly alien to current artificial intelligence, which relies on forward generation rather than the complex backward planning required for an FTP foreshadow trigger payoff structure. It has been a wild ride through the mechanics of the human brain.
It certainly has. But before we sign off, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, somewhat chilling extrapolation from Catherine Elkins's paper.
I always like a chilling thought to end on. Lay it on us.
Right now, as we discussed at length, AI struggles mightily with this. It suffers from causal hallucinations. But computer scientists are actively, right this very second, building frameworks like the codified CFPG we just talked about to teach AI how to execute these long-range narrative commitments. Why does this matter outside of literature? Because fiction represents uniquely powerful cognitive and emotional patterns for modeling and influencing human behavior.
Narrative is essentially the operating system of the human mind.
Precisely. If, or, let's be honest, more likely when AI finally masters the architecture of the perfect twist, it won't just be a neat creative achievement.
No.
It won't just mean AI can write a really good beach thriller. Mastery of these patterns would represent a potent vehicle for human manipulation at an unprecedented scale.
Wow.
Think about it. If an AI can effectively hack our narrative psychology, utilizing temporal asymmetry and informational revaluation to make us fall deeply in love with a fictional twist, well, what else can it convince us of?
That's a scary thought.
If it learns exactly how to plant a red herring to perfectly distract us, or how to weaponize the primacy effect to make us believe a false fabula in a political narrative or a news cycle, it transitions from a storytelling tool into a weapon of mass persuasion.
Wow. That is genuinely terrifying. If it knows how to build the psychological maze, it knows exactly how to guide the rat to the cheese.
Exactly.
It takes us right back to where we started today. You go to the doctor, the x-ray shows a clean break in the bone, physical causation. It's safe, it's visible, it's understandable.
Predictable.
But the human mind, the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of the world, that is a murky, complex landscape. And very soon, we might not be the only ones navigating those muddy waters.
We won't be. And that is exactly why understanding these mechanics, having that X-ray vision into how narrative works on us, is no longer just a fun exercise for writers and film buffs. It is becoming an essential skill for cognitive self-defense in the modern world.
Cognitive self-defense, I love that framing. Thank you to everyone for joining us on this deep dive. Next time you read a book or watch a movie, look for the unfired guns on the wall. Look for the red herrings trying to distract you. Pay attention to how the story is trying to build a context in your mind. Keep your X-ray specs on.